with the beginning, how Jesus ascended into heaven, and we celebrate Ascension of the Lord on Thursday. It's one of the feast days, I told you, because in the same way Jesus ascended into heaven, the angels said that he's going to come again. Every liturgy is the second coming of Christ. It is also important because as he is ascending, he's sort of laying out a plan for his disciples, for us, for the apostles who are wondering, like many today are wondering, is it now, Lord, that you're going to come and establish this promised kingdom and so on? He says, don't worry about that. That's not yours to worry about. You're going to be my witnesses in all of Judea and Israel and Samaria and to the end of the world. And we'll see, we've seen that they're going to the end of the world. Now we've started following Paul, and we said that this is pretty much the book about Paul, how he is going to be actually the 12 apostles, not as human thought. Peter was sort of thinking, oh, we have to choose the 12 because Judas has betrayed Jesus and they've chosen Matthias. But then the whole book of Acts is actually telling us, well, this 12th one is actually Paul. And so in Orthodox iconography and traditionally in the history of the church, you always see on Pentecost icon, on Ascension icon, that there is no Matthias, but there is Paul, even though historically, so there is many layers of why we have Paul in all these icons and in church iconography. Well, first of all, it's the eschatological event. Eschatology, the meaning of the word eschatology comes from the Greek word eschaton, and eschaton means the eighth or the future day, the things that are about to happen. So we're all going towards eschaton, where the fullness of truth will be revealed. As Apostle Paul there, we will see face to face. Now we see as if in the mirror. So we now can't see the full truth of things, of anything around us. And I was telling, even when Pilate has brought Jesus to be crucified and sentenced, when Pilate asked Jesus, what is the truth? What is the truth? Jesus didn't respond anything. And I often say truth is nothing, really. Truth isn't the thing, even. The person of Jesus Christ, that's the truth, because he will say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So he's that truth. And the more you the more you submit to him, the more you humble yourself in front of God, the more he's going to reveal himself to you. So that's why this prayerful life, and I'm constantly emphasizing to each and every one of us, you need to have this discipline of prayer where you're going to, when you get up in the morning, you're going to say your prayers. Before you go to bed, you're going to say your prayers. So not because God needs it, I told you many times, because you need that, so that this humble yourself. All right. So that you sort of open up yourself to God, so that God can, so you, in prayerful atmosphere, you're opening up to God so that God can reveal himself to you. How he's going to do that, that's God's business. I can't tell you. And whoever says to you, this is how it's going to happen, or if someone tells you, I've got a recipe, how is this going to happen? Don't trust them. Because God is God. God can do whatever he likes. So we see here that God has revealed pretty much in the book of Acts that Paul is this 12th apostle. We have followed him pretty much now as we come to chapter 21. He has completed what we call 3 missionary journeys. So that's maybe when we come to the end, we may mention that, whether there was a 4th missionary journey or it wasn't. But he's completing these 3 missionary journeys. And last time we have seen him in Ephesus and how he was accused that he's sort of destroying the temple of Diana, and and those craftsmen, those who were building those statues of Diana, they sort of didn't like that. He's returning to Greece. he wants to go to Jerusalem for the feast day, and you'll see that oftentimes that many times he wants to go for the feast day to Jerusalem. And this is especially a note for our Protestant friends, where they think Christianity is this new religion, there's nothing to do with the Old Testament, and it's not important whatever there was in the Old Testament. But here we see many times they're going to Jerusalem for the feast day. What's the feast day? Well, Pentecost, for example, Pascha. They want to be there for the feast day. And when they are in Jerusalem, we'll see they are in the temple, but they're also celebrating Eucharist. Okay? So it's not just that the Old Testament and what was written in the Torah or by the prophets is less important. It's actually more important now that the Messiah has come, because this is now fulfilled. So now we have all the meaning. We know what it all meant. These people, before the Messiah has come, they had no idea what this is. So now it's got even greater meaning for us. So we need to even more to study the Old Testament and to sort of understand why is it there and so on. So it has, as I said, unlike our Protestant friends who may think that the Old Testament is of less importance, it's actually even more important now. And he's going to Jerusalem, and we'll sort of we'll get started then from chapter 21. Okay. Oh, in chapter 20, he had this long farewell with the presbyters that he has gathered in Ephesus. So he was again going to, he was sort of past. He wanted to go past Ephesus, but he sort of stopped. He called them. And he gathered them all together, and he's laying out for them sort of a plan how. And I think that's important. Maybe I've skipped that last time. He's sort of telling them, watch and remember, that for 3 years I did not cease to warn everyone night and day with tears. And he says, I commend you to God and to the word of his grace. Now I'm reading just parts from chapter 20 so that we can go on into chapter 21. I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel. Yes, you yourselves know that these hands have provided for my necessities. And so he's saying sort of, everything I've done for the gospel. I've been preaching the gospel, and I took every opportunity. I took every opportunity that I could in order to preach the gospel, and I didn't ask no reward, nothing. So and he's saying pretty much like, it's not just that I was telling you, like the Pharisees or the Sadducees from the temple have been telling you the right thing to do. He's saying that I've been doing it also. Because the problem, you'll hear also Jesus saying, oh, you've got the Pharisees and those who sit on the seat of those who sit at the seat of Moses, on the seat of Moses. Well, listen to what they are saying to you, but don't do what they are doing. All right? So they're hypocrites. And Jesus got this long sermon of say, woe to you, Pharisees and hypocrites and scribes, because you do this, this, and that. You say this, but you do the other thing. What Paul is saying, and this is the new thing, he's not just saying the right thing, because even the Pharisees before him and the scribes and the Sadducees, they were saying the right thing, but they weren't doing the right thing because they were all corrupt. As you know, or you may not know, but the high priest and his family in Jerusalem, they owned about 70% of private land that didn't belong to Romans in Judea. Okay, so they were pretty corrupt, and they were forcing other people, other Jews, to work for them on the land that was supposed to be their land. That's why you see the destruction of that's why you have these, and we will see this now as we go along. We've seen that when when Jesus was crucified, that there was this sect of Pharisees and Sadducees, and they didn't like them. They didn't like each other. They were enemies because Sadducees were the priests, and Pharisees and scribes were the other party. So there were pretty much three parties, but two main ones. So Sadducees, they were priests. They only followed the Torah, the five books of Moses, and Pharisees, and Paul was one of the Pharisees. They pretty much accepted everything what we today accept as the Old Testament. So all the prophets, historical books, and all of that. And they believed in resurrection. And the Sadducees, even though they were high priests and priests and so on, they didn't believe in resurrection. So they had these theological, religious disputes of what's right, what's wrong, and so on and so on. All right. So Paul, unlike any of them, he's actually doing the right thing and saying the right thing. And he's saying this to the presbyters that he has gathered in Ephesus. And he's going to Jerusalem. By the way, if you remember, he was collecting the donations across the rich lands in the Mediterranean. So he was going. So you'll see that his main port, his central part is Antioch. So whenever he's going anywhere, he's going back to Antioch, okay? And you'll see that in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians, right? And this was a rich city. It had about 1 million people. It was a hub. It was like huge and so on. But he's collecting from these rich cities of Greece and Macedonia and Mediterranean, so the whole Mediterranean coast. He's collecting donations. So one of the reasons he wants to go to Jerusalem is the feast day, but he also needs to deliver these collections that he has collected, because these poor peasants in Judea, they've got nothing. Like they're poor and hungry. The ports that he's sort of going around, like Ephesus, he's a huge city. The Temple of Diana, one of the seven wonders of, that's why I was saying to you, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Rich people are there, rich people go to synagogues, and he's collecting donations, not for himself. And he's saying that I'm not taking it for myself. I'm taking that. He's going to take that to Jerusalem. He's going to take that to the church in Jerusalem, to these poor people, because Jerusalem is a poor city. Okay, all right. So let's go now to chapter 21. Eventually, we're going to go faster here. All right. Now it came to pass that when we had departed from them and set sail, running a straight course, we came to Kos and followed they to Rhodes, and from there to Patara. You see again, so Luke, who's writing this, the evangelist, is with them in this party with Paul. And finding a ship sailing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set sail. When we had sighted Cyprus, we passed it on the left, sailed to Syria and landed at Tyre. For there the ship was to unload her cargo. You see here how there are many stops. They stop here to Kos and Patara and Rhodes and Cyprus and Phoenicia and Syria and Tyre and so on. So these are all port cities. And he says, and we've seen Cyprus sighted on the left, because you see here how they're traveling. Ships are not going far off the coast. They're too scared. So they're in Macedonia up northwest. And they need to go to Jerusalem. So or when they were in Athens, they weren't sailing straight across the Mediterranean Sea all the way to Jerusalem. No, they're not doing that. They're following the coast, and the Mediterranean coast is pretty long, like really. And so so ships are traveling. So these are cargo ships, or they're ships that are full of some trading ships. People are trading, people are in business of trade and so on. And all the time, some ship is coming. And so they would board one ship, and he says, oh, well, I'm going just to Kos. So, that's far, that's fair enough. That's close enough for us. We'll find some other ship. And sometimes people would be even trapped in these ships, because people wouldn't have the money to pay. And so the owner of the ship would force them, and they would become sailors, not because they've chosen, but because they didn't have the money to pay for their trip. And so the owner would force them to work for, they would become, slaves. Sort of, you have to work now for 2-3 years for me to stay on this ship. So it was pretty interesting, how people were traveling at that time. Sorry. I wanted to go faster. And finding disciples. All right, they came to Tyro. And Tyro, it's a it used to be the Phoenician Empire was huge at that time. It's long gone. The Romans have defeated that. Still, there are Phoenicians there. And you see, in Tyro, which is today Syria, Lebanon, pretty much. Today, that's Lebanon. And finding disciples, you see this? They found disciples. They found Christians there. Okay, which is amazing. So what I wanted to tell you here, we're following here only one story. After the martyrdom of Stephen, remember that all of the apostles, all of the disciples, there's 70 apostles, 12 close ones, but then 70 apostles Jesus had chosen. They went all across the globe. That's why John will say the last word. If all the works of Jesus were to be written, the books that would be written, they wouldn't fit in the whole world. So we're now following only one story here. Some of the disciples have already been in this Tyro, and there are disciples there, okay? Please mind you this. This is very important also for our Protestant friends who are just saying, oh, sola scriptura, only the Bible, and so on. Mm. The Bible is following here only one story, okay? Only one story, that they found disciples there, okay? We stayed there. I'm continuing verse 4 in chapter 21. And finding disciples, we stayed there 7 days. They told Paul through the Spirit not to go up to Jerusalem. When we had come to the end of those days, we departed and went on our way. And they all accompanied us with wives and children till we were out of the city. And we knelt down on the shore and prayed. When we had taken our leave of one another, we boarded the ship and they returned home. You see how they love each other? Like they're all kind of following them all the way to the port. They knelt together, they prayed and so on. Like this is so moving, so moving. But mind you, they're telling Paul, what are they telling Paul not to do?
Go to Jerusalem.
Yeah, they're saying to Paul, do not go to Jerusalem. Okay, this is an important part to remember. And when we had finished our voyage from Tyre, we came to Ptolemais, greeted the brethren, and stayed with them 1 day. On the next day, we who were Paul's companions departed and came to Caesarea and entered the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now this man had 4 virgin daughters who prophesied. And as we stayed many days, a certain prophet named Agabus came down from Judea. When we had come to us, he took Paul's belt, bound his own hands and feet, and said, "Thus says the Holy Spirit, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man who owns this belt, and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles." Okay? So this is another warning to Paul. Do not go to Jerusalem. You will have troubles, not just troubles. You will be bound, okay? You will be captured. Now, when he heard these things, both we and those from that place pleaded with him not to go up to Jerusalem. And then Paul answered, "What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." Okay? Please remember that this is a crucial moment here. Paul is ready to die, but he is not. Okay, he's not asking to be bound. He's not asking to be captured. So he's not a masochist, in other words. So he's not looking for trouble. Okay.
Yes.
But he has a mission. He has a mission. You will see now, pretty much, whenever is Paul arrested, he takes this as an opportunity to preach. That's why this whole thing is aiming for one thing that I told you. He wants to go to Caesar. He wants to go to the emperor because he wants the whole world to become Christian. That's also on the note of those of you who haven't heard this, on our Protestant friends who are saying that Constantine has ruined Christianity when the whole empire has become Christian and so on. Paul wanted the whole empire to become Christian, because the mission of the apostles was that the whole world, we are singing this in the Troparion of Pentecost, which is the main thing, main hymn for Pentecost Sunday and for the whole entire week. And we sing this Troparion of Pentecost: blessed are you, Christ our God, who has revealed the fishermen as wise men by sending upon them the Holy Spirit, and through them you have caught in the net the whole world, all over mankind. Glory to you. Through apostles, in the net, God has caught the whole world. The aim of the gospel is for the whole world, everyone to hear the gospel and everyone to be converted. So it's not just this our private company, few of us here in this, outpost of the world in Wollongong, somewhere in this, hall online and Zoom and so on. This is not a private matter. It's about the whole world to become Christian. Everyone needs to hear this. So, and Paul, I'm ready to die. I'm ready to die. He's saying this. Please remember that. We'll come later to this once again. So when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, "The will of the Lord be done." And after those days, we packed and went up to Jerusalem. Also, some of the disciples from Caesarea went with us and brought with them a certain Mnason of Cyprus, an early disciple with whom we were to lodge. And when we had come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. And when it says here all the elders were present, it means all the presbyters. I told you already, original Greek says here all the presbyters were present. So we see here what you won't hear in other interpretation of this of the Acts. We see here that the church has a structure. There is the Bishop of Jerusalem, who is James, and he has his presbyters, priests, elders around him. And where is Paul going first when he comes to Jerusalem? He goes to the bishop of that city and to the presbyters, to the priests. He goes here straight away. You have the same structure of the church, of the Orthodox Church here today. You have the bishop, you have the presbyters or the priests, the deacons, the laity, and that's what the church is. Unchanged since the Lord Jesus has established the church. Okay? We see this in this verse 17 and 18 of chapter 21. Okay. When he had greeted them, he told in details those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord. And they said to him, "You see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they're all zealous for the law. But they have been informed about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow." You remember the vow of Nazarenes? That Paul has taken a vow of Nazarene. That vow of Nazarene could have been taken permanently or just for temporary time. For example, for John the Baptist, it was prophesied that he will take the vow of Nazarene, which means they would shave the head and the beard, and then from then on, they would not touch it. So the beard would grow, the hair would grow, they would wear certain clothes, a leather belt, eat certain food, so abstain from wine, from anything like John the Baptist. John the Baptist took the vow of Nazarene, living in the wilderness. Yes?
Where would we find more of a description of the Nazarene? What you just told us?
I can't tell you. Google it now. Yes. So that's sort of the proto model or the primary model of what we today have as a monasticism in the Orthodox Church. So that's what monasticism is, okay? But the Nazarene vows, Paul took it to himself, as we have witnessed when he had circumcised Timothy. You remember, Timothy was a young man, and because Timothy's mother was a Jew, he actually took Timothy to be circumcised, even though he was an adult and grown up. Okay? You remember that part? All of you, just wanted to remind you. So now James knows about this. He's the brother of the law. He's the bishop in Jerusalem, but he's heard that Paul is being accused that he's forcing Jews not to follow the law of Moses. That's why James says now to Paul, take 4 men, take them to the temple, and you're going to be a public witness that they're going to take these Nazarene vows, which will be a signal to all the Jews that, yes, you are following the law of Moses. Okay? Okay, I'm going to continue. Take them and be purified with them, and pay their expenses, so that they may pay the expenses. Mean you're going to be their sponsor. Pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that they all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. Which is pretty, it says here 4 things. I told you that there is actually 3 things, because from blood and strangled things, it's the same thing. Because if you eat an animal that was strangled, it means the blood hasn't flown away, and the blood is there, so it's the same thing. Okay? And I told you, and I'm reminding you why these 3 things are so important. Because for everything else, in the law of Moses, it doesn't say, oh, if you have your neighbor who's not Jewish, who's not an Israelite, living there with you, he has to also not eat meat and not eat shellfish and live this and make a house like that and so on. God, you have 613 commandments in the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, in the Torah. Okay? So for the Jews, everything, all of these 613 commands, they had to fulfill it. But only for these 3, God says, you and your neighbor and your servant and everyone. So everyone needs to abstain from sexual immorality, not just you and your household, but even your neighbor, even your servant, no matter whether he's an Israelite or not. Everyone needs to abstain. So this is pretty tough measure. You would say, oh, how can you sort of from all the 613 commandments come to only these 4 or 3, basically? Well, because God himself says this is going to be applied for everyone, not just for you. So that's what the disciples, the apostles, James and all of them on the apostolic council, they have decided that. Okay? So that's it. Verse 26. And then Paul took the men, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. Now, when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everything against the people, the law and this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophimus and the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. Okay? So this is the thing. Anyone knows what Hanukkah is? Hanukkah is a feast day for the Jews. If you read the book of Maccabees, you'll find that Ptolemaeus has desacralified or defiled the temple of Jerusalem by slaughtering pigs there, forcing Jews to eat pork, forcing Jews to exercise naked as Greeks would exercise, preparing themselves in gymnasiums for Olympic Games and so on. That was a custom. For Jews, that was a total blasphemy. So you couldn't be naked, you couldn't eat pork, and so on and so on. So the temple of Jerusalem was defiled And so when they taken over the Temple of Jerusalem again, they blessed it, made it pure, and so on. And that's Hanukkah. Hanukkah is this new enlightenment and so on, the reconsecration and purification of the temple and so on.
Is that to Jewish people, like, they celebrate?
They celebrate
every
Hanukkah.
year?
Yeah, every year. Yeah, that's right.
Do you
Yeah.
know what date? Or we can Google.
Yeah, around Christmas time. Yeah, that sort of thing. So for Jews, someone who's Gentile, he's not allowed to go into the temple. There is a designated place for Gentiles in the temple. I've shown you that you have, because Herod the Great has built a temple, and Herod the Great wasn't Jewish proper by himself, and he himself was pretty much cooperating with other Gentiles, cooperating with the Romans, build a temple, and so on. And then when he built the temple, he made this court of Gentiles, court for women, and this and that. And many problems were arising out of that.
Wasn't he an Edomite?
Yeah, he was an Edomite. So he was a Gentile, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he wasn't the Jew. So, and he built the temple. So anyways, that's just an note why, the time was ready for the temple to be destroyed, by the way, in year 73, when it was decided, when it was destroyed, because Jews themselves had so many divisions within their community. Okay. But these guys, they're coming, they've seen Paul, and they say, get him, help this guy. We need to capture this guy. So a mob pretty much is rising here. Okay. Verse 30, and all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now, as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the commander of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the commander why did they stop beating Paul? Told you already, Jews were not citizens of the Roman Empire. So they were pretty much like cattle to the Romans. So when an uproar, or this sort of a revolution starts, and the commander of the city comes with his garrison and with the centurion, and the centurion means, what Romans, the English word decimate, when you need to decimate something. You know what Romans were doing, how we have this word decimate? The Romans would come and they would kill 10% of everyone. Like, that's what it means. So you have an uproar, the Roman army is coming. Oh, we pretend like nothing's happening. We're all good. We're all good. Okay. So that was what was happening there. So they knew 10% of them are going to be killed. Like, they didn't care. They didn't care who are they going to kill, because they just wanted order and peace. Because for Romans cared only for resources, because conquering land for Roman Empire was, we just need these resources. We just need this wealth. That's what we need. And these people here, they're the same to us as animals. Like, and you have this army. They're like zookeepers. No, they are like. So if there is too many of these animals, you got to restrain them. You have to decimate them, and just keep them in order. So that's what it is. So everyone is silent when the Roman army comes. All right. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. All right. And then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains. And he asked who he was and what he had done. And some among the multitude cried one thing and some another. So what did these people, these Jews who wanted to seize Paul, what did they want to do? They wanted to kill him, because that's how things were solved at that time. Because Romans couldn't care less what these Jews are doing. Romans couldn't care less. All right? And usually that's how things were sorting out. But now, because there was such an uproar, that this could turn into a total riot. The soldiers are there. Now everyone is fine, okay? I'm continuing. So when he could not ascertain the truth because of the tumult, he commanded him to be taken into the barracks. When he reached the stairs, he had to be carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying out, "Away with him!" Then, as Paul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I speak to you?" He replied, "Can you speak Greek?" So, commander pretty much thought this is one of the peasant Jews. He thought he's dealing with these peasant Jews. He just wanted this all to be get done and over with. And now he was surprised. He's surprised this guy can speak Greek because the common language at that time was Greek. So and now he sees, okay, this is something new. Now, he got his interest and, his attention. Are you not the Egyptian who, listen now. Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a rebellion and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness? So you see what's happening here? All these messiahs, you remember how Jesus said you'll have many messiahs come? So this is also one of the messiahs, probably, that stirred up the crowd. So he thinks that Paul is this Egyptian, all right, who stirred up a rebellion and led 4,000 assassins into the wilderness. Okay? So he got things mixed up, all right? But Paul said, I'm a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I implore you, permit me to speak to the people. Okay, you see what Paul wants here? He wants to preach. He wants to speak to the people, and he's got the great opportunity. He's a Roman citizen, so he's got the right. So what would happen if Paul was just a common Jew? He would just be killed, like so many other apostles have been just killed. But Paul is a Roman citizen, so he's got some rights there, okay? Permit me to speak to the people. So when he had given him permission, so he has to. Now a commander is in trouble. He's arrested. He's put in two chains, if you remember that detail, in two chains. A person who's a Roman citizen, he's not sentenced, he's not trialed, but he's in chains. And why is the commander allowing Paul to speak? Because he sees now, all right, he's a Roman citizen, I have to allow him. So when he had given him permission, Paul stood on the stairs, and motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke to them in Hebrew language, saying, now he's addressing the audience in Hebrew. You see how clever, how smart he is, how talented he is? Not just that he's inspired with the Holy Spirit, but he's actually very smart, okay? Chapter 22. What is Paul saying now? Brethren and fathers, hear my defense before you now. And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent. Then he said, I'm indeed a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, taught according to the strictness of the father's law, and was zealous toward God as you all are today. And I persecuted you see here? He says, again, we hear here, this is a very important name, Gamaliel. Gamaliel is you remember when Peter and John were arrested the first time from the chapter 4 in the book of Acts? They were arrested and they wanted to kill them. And the person who got up to protect John and Peter was Gamaliel. He said, you remember what Gamaliel said? Gamaliel said, let them go, because if this is from men, this is going to go away. But if this is from God, we are going to find this. And also, if you read Talmud, open the Talmud. Talmud is what? Interpretation of the law of God. This person says this teacher said, you'll see maybe even 50% is Gamaliel said. So even now, for Jews, Gamaliel is a huge authority, huge authority. So when Paul said he is the disciple, so he lived with Gamaliel. The way someone would be taught to be a Pharisee at that time, he would spend 2 to 10 years with his teacher, depending how old someone is and so on. So he spent 2 to 10, at least 2 years, but 2 to 10 years with Gamaliel. He's a trained rabbi of the Jews. And people are listening. One of the reasons why people are listening to Paul, because he was taught at the feet of Gamaliel. Again, I'm saying at the feet, meaning the teacher would be sitting on a chair and his disciples would be either standing or sitting at his feet listening to him. So this is a common phrase in ancient times when someone is a disciple and someone is a teacher who says, "Oh, I was taught at the feet of this person or that person, at the feet of Jesus." You'll have that as well. Okay. I persecuted this way to the death. You see verse 4, chapter 21. I persecuted this way to the death. Way, what's the way? Christians. We've seen that the Christian community is called the way. The way, okay? I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women, as also the high priest bears me witness. So he wasn't just persecuting them. He had a letter of authorization from the high priest. That's why he says he calls the high priest as a witness. I was authorized by the high priest to do all of this. Like I was in authority, I was in power. And all the council of the elders, from whom I also received letters to the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there to Jerusalem to be punished. Okay? Very important tense here. It's I was. All right? This is very important. I was. Later on, he will address to some Christians and churches in Corinth, for example. You know that you were adulterers, that you were sinners, that you were this. You know what's this to say? Repentance is real. Repentance is possible. Change for better is possible. Because he was persecuting, he was doing all of this. Not anymore. Okay? Verse 6, chapter 21. Now it happened, as I journeyed and came near Damascus, at about noon, suddenly a great light from heaven shone around me, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? So I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. And those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. This is, by the way, a new detail that we haven't heard in the previous description of this event, that those who were with him also saw the light, okay, but didn't hear the voice. Okay, this is a new detail here. So I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Arise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all things which are appointed for you to do. And since I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of those who were with me, I came into Damascus. Then a certain Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good testimony with all the Jews who dwelt there. By the way, you see how he addresses Ananias? Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good testimony with all the Jews who dwelt there. He knows exactly what he needs to say. He doesn't say, oh, he's a disciple of Jesus. No. He's saying, this Ananias, go there into Damascus. In other words, he's saying, go there and talk to all the Jews in Damascus. They'll tell you who Ananias is. He's a devout man. He follows the law, all of that. Because what is their accusations against Paul? Their accusations against Paul is that he's not following the law, and that he's teaching other Jews not to follow the law. He's saying now here, go and ask the Ananias. He is a devout man, follows the law, okay? Verse 13. Came to me, and he stood and said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that same hour I looked up at him. Then he said, The God of our fathers has chosen you that you should know his will and see the just one and hear the voice of his mouth. For you will be his witness to all men of what you have seen and heard. And now, why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Okay? You see how he says now in a different way, again, God of our fathers has chosen you, that you should know his will. Please note this. And see the just one, the Messiah. The Messiah is here. The Messiah has come. Okay? Verse 17. Now it happened when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple that I was in a trance and saw him saying to me, Make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, for they will not receive your testimony concerning me. So I said, Lord, they know that in every synagogue I imprisoned and beat those who believed on you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, consenting to his death and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him. Then he said to me, Depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles. You see, we hear here another detail. As a Pharisee, he couldn't be actually participating in stoning of Stephen, but he admits that is his sin. The way the Pharisee would support a stoning of someone, he would mind and wash the clothes of those, because they would take off the upper clothes, leave it at one spot, and go and stone the person who has to be stoned. But Paul says, I was minding the clothes of those. Meaning, he was saying to all of us, I support this killing. I'm there. I'm also throwing the stone, but because I'm a Pharisee, I can't kill myself, but I'm just going to mind and watch these clothes that these men have thrown here on this one spot, meaning I'm going to guard these clothes. He says that, okay? Let's continue. Now, this is Paul's confession pretty much. Confession and preach. This is how he starts preaching. He confesses what he has done, how he was a sinner, okay? And how God has revealed himself to him, even though he was a sinner, whilst he was still a sinner, in other words. So God reveals himself not to the just necessarily. Paul was a huge, huge sinner at the time Jesus has revealed himself to him. Okay? Let's continue. Verse 22. And they listened to him until this word. And then they raised their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he is not fit to live. Then, as they cried out and tore off their clothes and drew dust into the air, now this is what's happening here. This is now an uproar. So they're throwing the dust, the earth, the soil into the air. Okay, and they want to kill him. And tore their clothes. And then, as they cried out and tore off their clothes and turned dust and threw dust into the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks and said that he should be examined under scourging, so that he might know why they shouted so against him. And as they bound him with tongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? Okay, you see what's Paul's now? Now he's pulling up his citizenship. When the centurion heard that when the centurion heard that, he went and told the commander, saying, Take care what you do, for this man is a Roman. Then the commander came and said to him, Tell me, are you a Roman? He said, Yes. The commander answered, With a large sum I obtained this citizenship. And Paul said, But I was born a citizen. So, probably Paul's father. So I told you before, when you gain citizenship of Rome, you would be able to pass on to your children. So probably Paul's father earned the citizenship, because Paul here confesses, but I was born a citizen. Then immediately those who were I told you also before that you had to earn yours. So he paid a great money. This commander paid a great sum of money in order to gain his citizenship. Then immediately those who were about to examine him withdrew from him, and the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. The next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. Now it's a different story. Paul has revealed that he's a Roman. A centurion has said, okay, let's see what's happening here. Because he wants to find out sort of what's happening. Chapter 23. I was planning to go all the way to chapter 24, because then we'll have 5, 6, 7, and 8, and that's going to be... So let's do chapter 23, and we'll finish here, okay? So we see here that Paul is now arrested. The Jews wanted to kill him. When he was arrested, Romans centurion realized that he's a citizen. He can't bound him, but he's arranging for the Jewish elders and the council members to come, and so he wants to hear what's happening here. Chapter 23. Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, "Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded that those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, but do you command me to be struck contrary to the law?" So we hear here, Paul starts speaking, and then the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. You see? And Paul said to him, "God will strike you." He's quoting the book of Numbers, "You whitewashed wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law?" Because it's not lawful for a high priest to go and to tell anyone to be slapped, to be stricken. He said, because the high priest is commanding, strike him on the mouth, so slap him. And how Paul is actually saying, you want to judge me by the law, and you're the first one to break the law. And he quotes him the law. All right? So Paul is very, very smart. Not just that he's smart, he's very educated. He knows what needs to be said publicly in his defense. All right? And we'll see that's going to bear some fruits actually later in this case. And those who stood by said, "Do you revile God's high priest?" You will find this, look this. And then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. So Paul is, again, as we say here in, can we see this in, no, you can't find it. Anyways, it's in italic. It means he's again quoting the Torah. But the thing is, oftentimes, even today, what you will find, not just in the Orthodox Church, but in all sort of hierarchical, but in Orthodox Church as well, I'm trying to teach you good theology here. Sometimes you'll hear a priest saying, "Oh, how dare you to address me like that, as a priest?" Or you'll hear bishops, patriarchs, archbishops, metropolitans saying, "Oh, you can't address to me like that. I'm a bishop, I'm an archbishop, I'm a metropolitan. You can't talk to me like that." please always remember this, what Paul is saying when he was accused by the high priest. Okay? So Paul, so it's not, invoking of the, just on the cassock that I wear or the Archbishop or Metropolitan does not mean that this by itself requires obedience. Okay? But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Men and brethren, I'm a Pharisee, the son of Pharisee. Concerning the hope of resurrection and the dead, I'm being judged." So you know that Sadducees don't believe in resurrection, as I told you. But he noticed there in the crowd, there are Pharisees there and scribes. By the way, scribes and Pharisees were the most educated people in the Jewish society. That's why they're called scribes, because they know the scriptures. So I told you, they would spend 2 to 10 years with their teacher, with the rabbi, teaching. And what was the first thing they would do? They were rewriting, and they were writing the Old Testament, the law of God, the prophets, all the historical books. That's what they were doing. And they were studying all of that for years and years. And as you know, Pharisees believed in resurrection. And you remember this conversation. Jesus believed in resurrection. When Lazarus died, and that conversation from the Gospel of John, and we celebrate the Saturday of Lazarus, when he meets Martha and he says, do you believe in the resurrection? And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life, and so on. And so we know, and Paul says, he is straight away, he wants to win one side of the party. You see, Paul is not trying to win the high priest. In his defense, he's not even noticing the high priest. For Paul has realized that the high priest is lost. The high priest is corrupt. And I told you already, Ananias and all the family of the high priest, they own about 70% of land in Judea. They were corrupt. They were working with the occupying forces of the Roman government. They had limited authority, no authority under Roman Empire, under Roman government as well at all. But they sort of cooperated with the Roman governments. When they found fit and convenient for Romans, they sort of gave them some sort of authority because it was convenient for the Romans, because they didn't want to muck around with these details and so on. And they had some authority with their own people. So in order to maintain them and keep them in brackets and so on, just to sort of keep peace and quiet there, they used them. So Paul knows that. Paul knows that the high priest and the priests are corrupt. And he's just writing him off straight away. But he sees there's Pharisees, educated men devout. He takes this opportunity to preach to them. And that's why he says, I'm a Pharisee concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I'm being judged. Straight away he says that. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. That's what Paul wants, okay? For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees party arose and protested, saying, we find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to them, let us not fight against God. So Paul has won them, okay? Now, when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. You see who is sending Paul to Rome? The Holy Spirit. This is what it is. So Paul is going to Rome because he's sent by the Holy Spirit. Okay? The Lord's to the Holy Spirit, the Lord. Christ is sending him there. Okay? And let's continue. Oh, by the way, just a note in verse 10, fearing, because the commander is sending soldiers to take Paul by force, because he's fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, because this is how problems were solved at that time. Like tearing someone in pieces was an ordinary thing for them to say. Like if they don't agree with him, whoever is stronger, they're going to win, like physically stronger. So they would physically tear him in pieces. Okay, so pretty much the commander has saved Paul's life. Okay, let's continue. Verse 12. And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would not neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Okay, so they have taken vows. Okay, they've taken vows they must kill Paul. That's what it is. And they will not eat or drink. That's how passionate and zealous they were. And they hated Paul. So they hated Paul from the bottom of their souls.
Question.
Yeah.
Was a part of why they hated Paul so much because of how he prosecuted Jews before?
No, he didn't prosecute the Jews. He was prosecuting Christians.
Yes, sorry.
He's prosecuting. No. Paul was on their side, on the Jewish side, totally, on the side of the law. He was a Pharisee. So there was already a division within the Jews. So one was Sadducees, the other was Pharisees. Paul was a Pharisee, but cooperating with Sadducees, because Sadducees were high priests and priests serving the temple and so on. Cooperating with them, he got a letter from Sadducees, from the high priest, to go and persecute Christians. So, but then Jesus appeared to him, and Paul has realized that Jesus is the Messiah. He was persecuting Christians because he was sent by this same party, by these Jews. They hate him because he has become Christian. That's what, and they want to kill him because he has become Christian. Yes.
So they feel like betrayed.
Yeah, well, they didn't feel betrayed. They know they were betrayed. They know because Paul has realized all what you believe that the Messiah is going to come. The Messiah has come. He is here. All the prophets that they're prophesying the coming of Messiah, all of that has been fulfilled. But they can't see that because of their hatred.
Why can't they see it? What if they?
Because they hate. First of all, because they're corrupt. Why can't I see? Why can't you see? Because of the sin.
Okay.
Whatever sin. The sin they had, the priests had a sin of corruption. So they own land.
Yeah.
They were tied with the Roman occupying government, and they were just after their own profit. That's why they couldn't see. The Pharisees, because of their own blindness of some other sins, many Pharisees will see that. Now, let's see, will also become Christians. There was also a word that Gamaliel became a Christian, which is not likely because we would know about that. It would be reported as one of the major things, like Paul, who was a Pharisee himself, became Christian, and that's a big deal. If Gamaliel was a Christian, I think that would be a very big deal for the Christian community, and we would know about that.
Another reason that they might have been blinded is in chapter 22, the point where there's an uproar is where he says that God told him to depart from the Jews and go to the Gentiles. So they might be offended, like, well, obviously that would be unheard of. Go to the Gentiles instead of the Jews, which is exactly when they, the first time, try to tear him to pieces.
Yes, because you see, still here, there is no two religions. There is no Christianity and Judaism at this time. So when Paul goes to Gentiles and converts them, they still think that he is bringing them into the synagogues, which he is, by the way. But we also said that there already was this sort of a this sort of rank of God-fearers who were very interested in Judaism and were coming to synagogues already. And most of them were actually wealthy Romans who were supporting the synagogues. And we know that from archaeological excavation, when we, on those panels of dedication, see Roman and Greek names. So already you have many Gentiles interested in Judaism, but they weren't totally part of it. And now Paul says, the door is open, the Messiah is here, enter into the community. And Jews think, no, they have to be circumcised, they have to do this, they have to follow all the law. And what the apostles have decided, no, they only have to keep three things. Abstain from idols, blood, and sexual immorality. These are the three things you have to abstain. Nothing else. If you're a Gentile. If you're a Jew, you have to follow the whole law. But for Gentiles, only three things. Well, it's not only as we see, it's quite a lot. All right. So, yeah, they hate him because they think he's changing their religion. So they think that he's changing Judaism.
It's a threat to their authority.
It's also a threat to their authority, but authority in terms of also power and money, control that they have over the people, influence that they have over the people. Some have money, some have influence. You know, like today, people want to be, to have control. You know, the two main power in the world are power and control. Main passions in the world. That's ruling in the family, in relationships, in governments, in companies. It's power and control. Power and control. That's what it is. Okay. Not much to the end. All right. And when it was day, some of the Jews, yeah, I said that already. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, we have bound ourselves under great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near. So they're now preparing a plot against Paul. So they're saying, okay, you go there and tell them you just want to speak to him a bit more and so on, but we're going to make a sort of an ambush and we're going to kill him. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. So we see Paul has a sister. Hello. He has a nephew. He's got a nephew. So Paul's nephew is saving him. And then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him. So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, Paul, the prisoner called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. And then the commander took him by the hand, went aside and asked privately, what is it that you have to tell me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they're ready, waiting for the promise from you. So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, tell no one that you have revealed these things to me. And he called, so you can see what's happening here. And he called for 2 centurions, saying, prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. He wrote a letter in the following manner. Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law. but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. So as we see here, the commander is sending Paul now with the guard of, as we can see, 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen to guard Paul, because he's a Roman citizen. He's got some rights. These guys have accused him. Romans want to do nothing with Jewish religious dispute and so on. He says, I can't see anything that this guy has done. They just want to kill him, but he's a Roman, and I'm going to get in trouble if he's killed because he didn't have a trial. So I just want to protect him. So he doesn't want to protect him because he loves Paul. He wants to protect his own self because Paul is a Roman, okay? And you have to protect them. So these are, all the Jews are animals. He's going to kill them. Doesn't really matter. So you see, how is this building up? Why the temple the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed just couple of decades later. There were these constant uproars in Jerusalem and so on. And the Romans, as with so many cities, like they destroyed Corinth, they destroyed Antioch later on. Corinth was leveled to the ground. And they would even put salt so that nothing grows there. And they would build a new city just to prove that they can do it, that they can rule. So if you don't obey, this is what's going to happen to you. So, and this is exactly what happened to Jerusalem, by the way. Anyways, then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. The next day, they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear you when your accusers have also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. So this is pretty much, so he's not chained, he's not in prison. He is in what we would call, what do you call that today when you have sort of freedom?
Not house arrest.
That's house arrest. So Paul is under house arrest. What do we have? Later on, we will hear that Paul stayed here 2 years. So he probably wrote about many of his epistles and letters to all the churches that we know from here, from Caesarea, while he was in house arrest. Because we'll see here that later on he was able to see people that were coming to him, you know. And he was kept in Herod's praetorium, which is pretty cool, you know.
It says that it's a palace.
It's a palace. Yeah, that's right. So that's it. All right. So next time we're going to finish the book of Acts. We just have 24, 25, 26, and 20. Maybe, let me see. No, it's 2.
28. Let me go up to 28.
How long did it put you want to go another one?
Another one? Do you want to go another one?
Yeah.
Let's see what happens to Paul in chapter 24.
Okay.
Do you want to go?
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah,
Okay.
if you're okay to go, Father.
All right, let's go. Now, after 5 days, Ananias the high priest came down with the elders and certain orator named Tertullius. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. You see what's happening here? The high priest is coming after 5 days with the orator. You know what's an orator? He's a paid guy. He's not even, and his name is the Roman, Tertullius. So they pay the guy to argue with Paul. You see what's happening here? A certain orator. So he's he's going to deliver orations on behalf of the high priest, because the high priest is not eloquent enough. I told you already that Pharisees were very eloquent, very educated. Now the high priest, because he knows what, but he's very wealthy, he's got the money, I told you already, he's bringing a guy to speak on his behalf, all right? So things are starting to really heat up here, okay? So they gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullius began his accusation saying, so they pretty much have a lawyer here, all right? They have a lawyer who's going to speak on their behalf. Tertullius began his accusation saying, seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. All right. What do we hear here? So this guy, totally removed from the reality of Jewish people, he is flattering Felix. He is flattering the Romans who have destroyed the Jewish people. They have taken everything from the people. All right? And he's saying, seeing that through you we enjoy great peace. Really? And prosperity? Are you for real? Is being brought to this nation by your foresight. We accept it always in all places. Like, you see what he's saying here? Like, no Jew would ever say things like this, okay? No proper Jew. They hated the Romans.
Bending the truth.
That's right. So you see whom the high priests have brought to speak on their behalf. You see why the destruction of the temple is coming here, okay? These guys in the temple are so removed from the reality of how their own people are living. Okay, let's continue. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazareans. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander, Lysias, came by and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come back to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. Then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge to this nation, I do not more cheerful, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. So he says here, Paul says it here very openly, I don't have any lawyer to speak, I don't have any orator to speak on my behalf. I'm going to speak for myself here. I'm going to defend. So you see what's happening here? Like, this is better than any movie, guys. Because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. Okay, he's saying, what? What are you saying? Like, I came to Jerusalem just 12 days ago, and to do what? To worship. I'm not causing any riots. Yeah, and he's going to say, yeah, I didn't have any time to organize anything. All right. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. Okay? I came to worship. This is what and you know that. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself will always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. He's, in other words, saying here, you know what? You, the Romans, have nothing to do with it. It's not of your interest. We are of the same thing. We believe in the same thing. This is our internal dispute. And you don't care about this, about our internal religious dispute that we have. That's none of your business, pretty much. That's what Paul is saying. So I haven't caused any riot. Came only 12 days ago. I came to worship. We belong to the same thing, he's saying. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept. That's what he's saying. That there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust, and that this being so, I myself also strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now, after many years, I come to bring alms and offerings to my nation. You see what he's revealing, and we know now very openly why Paul has come. He's bringing these offerings. He has collected donations for these poor people in Judea. And I'm bringing this on purpose because how removed, again, I'm emphasizing, how removed the priests are from the people. He's feeding the people, he's brought collections and so on. And these guys who are accusing him, they pay an orator, a Roman guy, to speak on their behalf, okay? Okay, now after many years I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with a tumult. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me, or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council. Unless it is for this one statement which I cried out, standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I'm being judged by you this day. So Paul knows exactly what to say. So he is saying, this is our internal dispute. You don't believe in these guys don't believe in resurrection. We believe in the resurrection, but this is our internal sort of thing. Now let's see what the decision is. But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. We see here Felix, the governor, doesn't want to make a decision. He says, I want to have more time to think about this. I want to wait Lysias, who is the commander, to hear his side of the story, what really happens, because I don't believe these peasants, anyone. Of course, he believes more Paul, and we're going to see this because, in the following way. So verse 24, chapter 24. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul, that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. As we see here, well, he wants to be bribed. That's one thing. The other thing is his wife is Jewish. So she's going to see Paul, as many other people, because Paul has this liberty to see whoever he wants to see, and everyone who wants to come to Paul, he comes to Paul. So he has a pretty comfortable life here. But Felix is also, so sort of in between. So he sort of expects to be bribed, but he also kind of maybe likes Paul in a way. We'll see. But after 2 years, that's why I said he stayed here 2 years. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound. So Paul was bound. He was in prison, which was not sort of a prison because he had the liberty. But we'll stay here because this is now important, and we want to be fresh for next week to understand what was happening at the trial and where Paul ended up. All right? Any questions or comments?
Really interesting. I loved it.
Yeah, it's great. I like this as well. All right, guys. See you next week then, and have a good evening. And
Bye, everybody.
hope to see you on the Ascension Day, which is on Thursday, one of the 12 major feast days. So the liturgy starts at 9 on Thursday, and Ascension is always on Thursdays. Sorry for you who work. Always on Thursdays. Always on the 40th day after Easter. Yep.
Thank you,
Okay.
Father.
Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye. Bye-bye.